All right. Welcome everyone to another live educational video in the Portrait Photographer's Resource. Today we have image critiques, and I have the ultra talented, the ultra sexy Gary Hill with me. Gary, say hi to the world.
Hi, everybody. It's lovely to be here, Sean. It's always great to catch up with you.
Absolutely. And Gary, for those of you who do not know Gary, you are joining us from the UK. So what time is it there?
It's just gone 10 p.m. in
Wow,
the
wow.
UK,
So
so
a little bit later for you. So
that's
I
fine.
really appreciate you kind of staying up past your bedtime a little bit. Although you are a DJ, so you're used to being up late, huh?
Yeah. I'm quite used to, particularly at the weekends, being very late. But yeah,
That's true. That's true. Well,
I can cope. I
for
can cope with 10 p.m. It's not that bad.
okay, all right. That's so I don't feel too bad then. But still, I
No,
really appreciate you staying up a little later than you usually would on a weekday. So thank you very
no
much.
problem. No
Yeah,
problem
so
at all.
Gary, for those who don't know you, you're a photographer, an educator, and honestly an all-around badass. But for those who don't know you, could you give us a little bit of info on who you are? Talk about your experience in the industry, maybe
hmm
some of your education stuff, basically anything you can do to paint a picture for us.
Okay, so I've been a full-time photographer for about 15 years now. Um, it was a changing career after being in the police service, and it was something I wanted to do. So Um, I was asked to educate first about 10 years ago. I was quite successful competition wise in the UK, and people started to get to know me. And it's the usual, well, show me how you do what you do. Um, and having been a trainer in my previous role, it was a case of using that as a big foothold in the industry as such. And in the UK, we have our qualifications like you do in the US, but it's done slightly differently. Most of ours are a 20 image critique panel. And then I got my fellowship, which is the highest level, about 7 years ago. And along with that comes judging and everything else that you do. So I've judged pretty much all over the place, with the exception of WPPI, though I have done the judging room at WPPI with Jerry and people like that. And I've been an educator pretty much full time for about 6 years, up until the last 2 years when I've been the director of photography and education of the Click Group. So quite a few people know us in the US through Click Backdrops, but what they don't also realise is that we do training events, we have a marketing company, and we have a full-time studio as well. So still keeping my hand in, but I've shot everything from weddings to portraits to animals. And at one time, I used to call myself the photographic prostitute because if you paid me, I'd shoot it. It was as simple as that. But I've taken a little step back, but I'm about to get a little bit more involved in shooting again. And I've been lucky enough to go over to the US probably 10 times, no, probably 14 times in the last 3 years,
Wow.
doing all the trade shows. And I've taught, this will be my third year coming up at Shutterfest. I've taught at
Okay.
ClickCon. I've done demonstrations at WPPI. I've done demonstrations at Texas School. I've done demonstrations. I've taught at SPAC. I've been at Sync, all of those. So I've been around a little bit, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that's me really.
That's great. Yeah, and one thing I would love to pick your brain about real quick before we jump into these critiques is, one thing that really struck me about your work and just seeing you teach is your amazing ability to understand the human form and being able to pose people. How did you teach yourself? Did you force yourself to really just learn how to pose, or is this something that came naturally, or what was kind of the inspiration behind that?
Um, what a lot of people don't know is that I'm high functioning autistic. So when I get something into my head that I need to learn, then I have to research and learn everything about it. So, whether it be music, whether it be blacksmithing, whether it be photography. So I'll take an element and I'll study it and I'll study it and study it until I really understand it as best as I can. Um, and it was the same with lighting. I've been a lighting trainer and sponsored by Elinchrom for a lot of years now.
Hmm.
And it was the same with posing. It was a case of deconstructing, it was learning as much as I could. But actually, I think where my old job in the police actually gives me a strength is I understand people.
Mm.
And I'm very much a people person and building rapport before I even think about getting into a pose, so that it means that things come naturally. But I'm a macro director, so
Right on.
I'll take the time. I used to call myself a lazy shooter, but I'm an efficient shooter. Even though I've only ever really shot digital, I
Mm.
shoot as if it's film. So
Okay.
I don't believe in pressing the button until the image is right. So I'll take the time to structure it, to light it, to pose it, all those elements, and then when I'm ready, then I press the button.
I love that. I love that.
You
Yeah,
know,
and
and
that's something that I feel like is lost a little bit, today nowadays.
yeah, when I see the wedding forums, I don't shoot very many weddings, probably 5 or 6 a year now at the most. But when I was shooting weddings, and I'd see on the wedding forums like 8 to 10,000 shots in a day, and I'm like,
It's a lot.
I, I have too much of a life to be bothered looking through 8 to 10,000. And because I'm sponsored by Fujifilm nowadays and shoot on the GFX, the thought of even looking through 10,000
Oh my
GFX
goodness.
JPEGs would frighten the life out of me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
so
they make amazing cameras. Those medium formats. Wow.
yeah, yeah, it's a great beast to have the luxury of playing with, shall we say? But yeah, I'm very much meticulous and take the time, get it right, build a rapport before I pick up the camera, and then everything else comes much easier,
I
much
love that.
easier.
Love that. Well, that's some great advice. And how does real quickly, I don't want to dive into this too much, but how does DJing fit into all this? Is it just a hobby? Because I know you love to DJ. And I do too. Is
Um,
it just a hobby
yeah,
or
well, it started. I did it when I was young, a lot of years ago.
okay.
You know, I was lucky. I grew up in the acid house era and
Yeah.
all of that, and I grew up in the north of England, which had a big scene, and I was very lucky to play a lot of fairly high level clubs back then. But then I let it go for a good few years, as in
Mm-hmm.
25 years, and then just picked it up a few years ago as a way of relaxing. But I get to
Love
play
that.
out every now and then, and it's my downtime as such.
Love that. Well, one of these days we're gonna have to spin a set together. I'd love to, throw
Definitely.
down with you. Maybe WPPI next year. We can convince
Yeah,
the crew
well,
to.
unfortunately, because you're not at Shutterfest this year, unfortunately, because we could have persuaded Sal to let us be the rave
Oh,
DJs for the party,
oh
but
man, I would be so okay with that if I
yeah,
had
it'd be
planned
good.
it better.
But it's all good. But we will do it one day, mate.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, anyway, I'm really excited to have you on board today because you have some amazing insight to give to all of us, especially someone as seasoned as you are with giving critiques. And I briefly took a look at the photos
Hmm.
before we're doing this right now, and we have some very high, amazing level of talent today. So some of these photos are honestly going to be a little hard to critique, and I'm excited for that though because maybe you're going to be able to pick up some stuff that I wouldn't even be able to see. So really looking forward to that. Um, Now, before we jump into the image critiques, I do want to give about 60 seconds to thank our brand new sponsor for the live image critiques, and that is now, if you are this is Evoto. Sorry if you never didn't hear me say that. If you guys are unfamiliar with Evoto, it's basically an artificial intelligence AI editing retouching platform. It is absolutely amazing. You can do a lot of different skin retouching, remove freckles, remove acne. You can remove face shine. There are so many things that you can do with Evoto, and you can do it with just a single click of a button. One of the things I love the most is actually the stray hair removal tool. As I just demonstrated here, it is so quick, it is so effective, and it is absolutely amazing and makes my workflow just speed up so much more. And I believe, Gary, you are actually. I believe you as well use Evoto. You're the one who showed me a little bit of it back at
Yes,
Shutterfest last year.
yeah, I was lucky enough to get involved with Evolto early last year, and I've been using it and had a little bit of sponsorship from them as well. And honestly, that when you're doing 14 shoots in a weekend in the studio and you need to get them out to the clients as soon as, it's amazing how fast the workflow is when you get used to it. So I urge everybody to have a look at Evolto because it is a game changer.
Definitely. And at the end of this video, I'm going to post a link where all of you can try it for free. I think it's about 50 credits. So you can just play with some photos, export them, see if they work for you. And at the very end, we're giving away two 1,600 credit giveaways, which is worth almost $300. So make sure you stick around for that. We're going to randomly select someone. So Avoto, thank you so much for sponsoring this. I think we're ready to jump in. We're going to start with image number 1. Are you ready, Gary?
I'm ready when you are.
All right, awesome. So let me just make sure I got the right. Oh, no, got the wrong screen pulled up. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, everyone. So here we go. This first image is submitted by, let's see, who was this submitted by? By George Sanders. And George said that this is a good friend of his. He used a plain black background and painted on a gold digital backdrop. One of his favorites. So Gary, I'm going to let you go ahead and start this. And by the way, I am looking at your comments on the screen to my right. So if you have any questions or you want some more clarification on what we're talking about, please go ahead and say something in the comments. So Gary, what do you think about this? What are your initial impressions here?
Okay, the initial impression is it's got great impact.
Gary, did we lose you?
Subject, it's well styled to suit the background. Oh, you got me?
We got you.
I'm still there?
Delay, I think. We're still here.
Okay. It's a long way across that pond, you see. That's what it is.
No worries.
Okay. So my first thing is the impact on this is really strong. It's a striking subject, interesting styling. And I've got to commend the author because the addition of the tones on the black backdrop has really brought some atmosphere to it. When I critique an image, I'm always looking at the little things and the ways just to improve the marginal gains as such. And while I find this really interesting, I just wish the author had pushed the light a little bit more to just give us a little bit more dynamicism. Now, looking at it as it is, this light's coming from the front left-hand side and it's coming across the subject, and it's flattening the features a little bit. Now, for this kind of profile shot, particularly with such a character like this, I'd have loved to have seen the light just pushed past the nose more towards the backdrop and coming across in like a short light pattern. That would have just given a little bit more definition, a little bit more definement to the features of this gentleman as such. But other than that, I honestly think it's a fantastic profile portrait. I love the fact that it's a proper profile where we don't see the far eye, and the way the texture's been brought out in the background and in the subject's hair, it really balances nicely. So commendable effort for that. I'd just play with the shadow a little bit more to just give a little bit more refinement to the face.
Absolutely. So to clarify, you're essentially saying that maybe the light's just slightly too flat and we would just reposition a little bit to give it a little bit more direction?
Yeah, just push it to the other side of the nose and let it come from the back towards the camera a little bit more. Gotcha. To just give us some shadow detail on what we would call the short side of the face.
Yeah, absolutely, because you have a portrait here that's so very moody, and it's just it makes you really sit and kind of think, oh, what is he thinking? What is going on in his head? It's very dramatic. It's very moody, and maybe by repositioning that light so there's a little bit more encompassed in shadow, it'll lend itself to that expression a little bit better.
Yes, 100%. And what I must also commend the author on is the application of the texture on the background, because they've allowed it to fall out of focus just enough that it doesn't conflict with the image of the actual person, which a lot of people make the mistake of having that texture on the background too sharp, and it competes with the subject. So yeah, well done on this.
It can definitely look like a copy and paste kind of thing, or Photoshop, so to speak. So yeah, honestly, George, I don't have really too much to add. This is such a shot at such a high level that I really, there's not much more I could say to you. But this is very well done. I really appreciate it. And Gary, your comments were fantastic. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next image.
Okay.
So, this next image comes from Veronica Martinez, and this was, wow, apparently this was her first time using off-camera flash. and she used a 600-watt strobe with a 36-inch softbox. It was a senior photo shoot. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'll start here just because
Okay.
you started last time. So yeah, Veronica, for first time using off-camera flash, it's excellent. Really, really well done. Couple small things here that I would personally recommend, but before I get to that, I want to talk about the things I like. I love that you've matched the scenery here with the horse a little bit. You know, it's a black horse, black dress, having that continuity and that, you know, just kind of that symmetry is so nice. And it was, I don't know if that was intentional, but whether or not it was, really, really good job there. Really interesting scene as well. You made an effort to, you know, make the background, the focus fall off on the background a little bit, so it's not as busy, which is very nice. Couple small things though, as I mentioned before. So for starters, I'm gonna start with just kind of more of the technical aspect of this. I do feel the image is a little cool. It could be warmed up just a little bit. If your intention was to keep, you know, that white balance down a little bit, totally fine. You know, art is in the eye of the beholder. But one thing that I am seeing here that I would probably recommend changing is I would like to see a little bit more fall off between the subject and the background, because one thing is when you're photographing a subject against a really busy background like this, you're going to get a lot of distracting and competing elements, right? So even though you did make an attempt to make sure that you're shooting maybe at a wider aperture, I would probably back off a little bit, give it a little bit more telephoto, or, you know, shoot with just a shallower depth of field to help cut out some of those distracting elements. The other thing as well is the pose. You know, she's looking a little uncomfortable with that horse, right? So I would love to see something, Veronica, where you're maybe integrating her a little bit better with the horse, having her maybe a little bit closer, just feel a little bit more relaxed, right? She's clutching onto that chain really hard, like she's nervous, and I don't blame her. I mean, I'd be nervous too. I'm not a big fan of horses, honestly, so I'd be a little nervous as well. But really, just changing the pose to have some more engagement with this horse, get that hand off of her hip, do something that just makes us feel like she has a little bit more of a connection. Gary, what else would you add to that?
Yeah,
Maybe
there's
disagree
very.
with me.
Yeah, I do agree with you completely on that, and I think when you have the, you know, I'm going to assume that this horse is known to her and that it's part of her um, lifestyle as such to a certain degree. And I totally agree about a little more of an interaction with it by perhaps bringing her forward, a hand on the face or something like that would have just relaxed it a little bit. I totally agree about the disparity in the warmth between the background and the subject a little bit. But I must massively commend, if this is somebody's first use of off camera flash, the balance just being that probably about
Mm-hmm.
half a stop over the ambient to just bring that down a little bit and create that separation has been really, really well handled. The only other thing I would add, and it's a personal view, is when you've got such a big beast like that, let it breathe a little bit in the frame. So give it a little bit more space at the top and maybe crop a touch off the left hand side. But other than the points that Sean's already brought up, I think it's beautiful. And do you know what I really must commend is the fact that the horse has been kept black. So many times when we see images like this, particularly in a scenic environment, white Labradors, black horses, that they have a blue tint. And in this, I think the colour balance has been handled well. And just perhaps separating the background and just putting a little warmth on that, I think would have
Mm-hmm.
really brought this to life a little bit more. But brilliant first effort with off camera flash. Really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one thing I like to do is I try to generally when I'm doing portraits, I try to match the white balance with the tone and the feel of the photograph, right? So maybe if
Mhm.
it's a little bit more of a moody situation where she's trying to look a little bit more, I don't know, emo or goth, so to speak. You know, you might use a cooler color temperature if you're trying to do a little bit more of a happier, warmer type of setting. Then, you know, bring that white a little bit. So it really just depends on your intent with the image. But Veronica, yeah, great shot, especially again for your first time using off-camera flash. Really well done. Okay, we got another photo here from a regular contributor. This comes from Radon Burton. Looks like a nice little, I'm assuming a husband-wife portrait here. But Gary, I'll let you start on this one.
Yeah, yeah. This is kind of my speciality. This in the studio, nice, clean, crisp shot. First and foremost, again, we'll talk the positives.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely connection with the subjects. Both of them are really strong to camera. Serene but thoughtful expressions, and I like that because I think sometimes people push for a smile when a smile isn't necessary. Um, and again, let's look at things like white balance is really well executed. All of those things have been done really well. I actually like the brown background against the slightly more purple hues that we're getting in the subjects, and I think it lifts them from that background. Too often we get that colour harmony of just using the same tones throughout, but this allowing those richer colours to be on the subjects and against that more neutral background has actually
Mm-hmm.
popped them a little bit more. A couple of points to just take this up a little bit. Firstly, let's talk about him, and I like his position square onto camera. It gives
Mm-hmm.
that masculine presenting look. Just be careful of cropping hands because we've got the crop here just going through the middle of the forearm, and I think if he brought this crop higher to just below his woggle on his necktie and actually cropped there and lost the arms in the mid upper arm position, it would have been um, a stronger crop than what we've got now. But other than that, and just that little bit of lens flare into a little bit of glare on the glasses, which again is just because he's turned his head very slightly to his right shoulder, so you're getting that angle of reflection coming into the camera. If he'd just turned his head just a touch more the other way, he'd have lost that. But again, I'll go back to Evoto.
Evoto.
There's
Yeah,
a,
I was gonna say the same
there's a
thing.
simple little slider in there that
You
you
beat
can
me
just
to
pull
it.
across, and that'll
Yep.
take that. So other than that, I think his expression is strong but serene and still gentle enough with his, I'm assuming, partner lent on him. And then when we look at her, now the problem you've got when you've got that staging where she's behind and he's in front is that head is just getting lost a little bit. So if it just been brought more towards the side of the head where the ear is,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just behind the head, we'd have seen all her beautiful radiance on her cheek there, and it would have just kept that tenderness of bringing the heads together, but without losing her a little bit behind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I would do from a pose point of view. And then I'm going to give you my ruling on hands. If they don't need to be there, don't put them there. So while I appreciate the left hand on the shoulder, it could have just been rotated a touch to just be a little flatter and a little bit more, less back of hand, more side of hand. But the right hand that she's got there, it's what we call an alien hand as such. It's kind of coming
Yep.
from nowhere. So when they're in that position, you could put that hand behind his back, and because of her body position, you would still see that she's connected with that hand, even though you can't see it. So it's sometimes a case of a little less is more with the hands. So taking that one out of the shot by being behind, it wouldn't look amputated because it's got a reason to be behind him. Then just rotate the other one so it's more side of hand. And other than that, I think just bringing her forward and we'd have a lovely, lovely even stronger portrait than what we've got now. But let's not take away from that connection and that lovely contrast between them and the eye contact camera. And I think
Yep.
you've got a lovely shot here.
Yeah, Gary, you literally said everything that I was thinking too. I there's not much more I could say because the first thing I was gonna comment on was the hands. Absolutely. The probably just to add a little bit more to what you were saying is that her left hand. One thing you could do is you're kind of hiding her fingers a little bit. So if you wanted to leave that hand there, which I think would be a good idea, have her just bring that hand down a little bit more so you can see a little bit more of those
Slide
fingers.
it onto the shoulder.
Yep, exactly. And you'll see, you'll get a little bit better view of her ring as well, which, further reinforces that connection and the fact that they're married. The right hand, she's doing this little claw thing. It's not very flattering. So, just keep that in mind. But yeah, really, honestly, the only other comments I would make would just be, repeating what you said, Gary. So I won't say much more. But Radon, this is awesome. This is a little different than what I normally see you doing. Usually you're taking photos of like big families, outdoors, and mountains and everything. So it's really nice to see this different perspective from you. So thank you so much for submitting this and giving this amazing image for us to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and move on. This next photo comes from Randall Mena. And Randall said that the temperature outside was 28 degrees Fahrenheit for you Brits. There's a blue gel behind the couple and ambient spray to reinforce that colder look. One main light with the double diffuser. So it looks like it's two light setup here. Two light setup. So yeah, I'll start with this. I'll start with this one. So I'm gonna start with what I like. So one thing I always try to encourage people to do, whether you're doing landscape photography, portraits, is if you can somehow incorporate some sort of foreground element to help tie the image together and create that layering effect, it's gonna make for a really strong image. So you did a very good job utilizing the terrain for that. The one thing that I think this image falls short on is you have a ton of unnecessary negative space between the top of their head and the roof of this building. The roof of this building in my opinion, isn't really a strong enough of a focal point to really include it in the image. So an easy fix, honestly, Randall, I would just crop it out. Just do like a square crop on this image, or just bring it in tighter and just eliminate that altogether, because what's happening is your eye is wandering all over the frame trying to find a purpose, so to speak, right? Trying to find out where the main subject is, and it takes away from what's really going on and what the really important parts of the image are, which is the bride and the groom here and this beautiful train of the dress. So that would be just my main critique here, is crop that image tighter, bring the viewer back into focus with what's really important, and I think you're going to have, honestly, a really stellar image. Gary, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yep, totally agree with the crop. I would lose the building altogether in this. Mm-hmm. In the crop, I would keep the train at the bottom, and I would crop somewhere, put their heads on that top third and go above them, because not only that, you'll lose that converging verticals as well then that you're getting from the wide angle lens. Love the atmosphere in it. I think the use of the mist behind them with the blue gel has really worked well, and the light on them is good. But other than that, I totally agree with what you say, Sean. Mm-hmm. Let's let it not pull us up there to that top of the roof and the pillars either side. Let's just stay with them and the nice use of the train or the veil at the front, and make it all about them and not about the location.
Yeah, and for you viewers at home, I just cropped this a little tighter on my screen so you can see, and I think you would all agree that it completely changes the dynamic of this image and makes it look so much better. So do you all agree? Do you think that this crop makes the image look more effective, or do you like it better before? I'd like to hear your thoughts here. But yeah, this is such a perfect example of, using light as a creative tool, right? And this is something that I know we both teach in our workshops, and using light to help tell the story. And in that regard, Randall, you did a phenomenal job. And one other thing I want to point out, now that I'm zooming in a little bit closer, is I can see quite a bit of wrinkles on the train. And if you were entering this in a competition or something, I would maybe encourage you to edit those out a little bit. And actually, Evoto, I know we keep plugging Evoto, but you can remove wrinkles in Evoto now, which is very nice. Very nice. So, Randall, as always, I love seeing your work. Thank you so much for submitting. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next image, and this comes from Brian Green. He has attached no information to this photo. So we're just going to take it at face value. I see a couple things here that maybe could be improved on, but I would love to hear from you first, Gary.
Yep, this to me looks like natural strong sunlight. Or perhaps there is the use of a flash from the front to balance the backlight. Yeah, there is.
Mm-hmm.
Now I look closer, it's definitely the natural light's coming from the rear, and I think it's been flashed from the front.
Yes.
First and foremost, I love the expression. Again, connection is good. I like the low angle to give the subject presence in the frame. And I actually like the location because it's quite cool and they've held the detail in the sky and all of that. So they're the things I really like. The skin tones are nice and clean, and those kind of things. The things that I would look to improve upon a little bit is because of the angle that the additional light's coming in at from this camera left side as such,
Mm-hmm.
with that arm being raised, it's catching the upper inside of the arm before it hits the subject, and anything that's closer to the flash is going to get more of it because of the inverse square law, and that means it's brighter than anything else. So while I want to focus on a face, my eye is getting instantly drawn to the inside of the upper right arm. So just one thing I always try and teach, and again, it comes back to that posing thing. If you're going to have an arm up, i.e., like it is here on the fence rather than the one that's on the knee, have it furthest away from the light. So it's the same if you're posing a hand to the face. Don't have it on the same side as the light is coming in from, have it on the opposite side. That way, it's going to hit the subject's face, which is your point of focus for most portrait type work, before it hits the arm. So that would mean that we wouldn't get that bright upper arm that we can see on this. And secondly, because that light is so far round to the camera left, I'm just losing the detail between the two legs. So I'm just ending up where the knee is up and the ankle is touching on the left leg onto the right leg, which is supporting, that I'm
Yep.
just losing detail there. So they're the couple of the main things, really. But I like the use of the location. It goes well with the styling. And it's just a tweak on that flash, I think, that if you brought it actually closer to camera axis, a little bit higher, I think you would have lit the subject just that little bit better. And we wouldn't have that issue with the arm and the merging on the shadow side as such.
Yep.
Um,
Just a
and
little
then,
higher on the flash.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. Yeah, and they're
Absolutely.
my main points, really.
Definitely. Gary, how would you feel? So, kind of one of the problems I'm having with this image, or one of the challenges that I'm seeing, is because her left leg is coming up,
Yeah.
you're kind of losing a little bit of, she almost looks like a pogo stick, right? You're losing a little bit of
Yes.
detail in her legs.
Yeah.
So
That
what?
separation.
Yeah. So how would you feel if we reversed it, where she brought up her right knee as opposed to her left knee? Do you think that would help that a little bit?
That that will massively help. Whenever
Okay.
you've got a limb that's going to be raised and is going to cross over the other limb, if it's means that the other limb behind it is going to have an element of amputation, i.e., blocking off at the knee so we can't see the joint, those kind of things,
Right.
then reversing that will mean that you don't have that issue. So
Yeah.
definitely. But I also think had the flash come around more to camera axis, more of a butterfly position perhaps, that we wouldn't have that merging as such because it would have got more
Right.
light. So either of those
Mhm.
could have worked, but you definitely get less of the issue if it was the other leg, and same as if this was the other arm, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which
Mhm. No,
which
absolutely.
totally would have worked. We brought that if it was the left arm going up and the right arm onto the right leg rather than the left leg, then we wouldn't have had that issue at all. And I think you're right, we'd have solved both of those with just a swap of the legs.
Yep, absolutely. And the only other thing I would add, Brian, is just a little bit more refinement with balancing those exposures, just because you do have such a strong highlight on her left arm there. We're getting to that that kind of danger zone where we're getting some blown up highlights a little bit. So just a little bit better balancing with your light, a little change the positioning of the light, and honestly, we got a great solid photo. What a cool spot you found. So. Um, Brian, thank you so much, as always, for submitting this photo. We're going to go ahead and move on now to number 6. This next photo comes from David Scott Bowles, and David did not attach any information on this photo either, so we're going to take it for face value. So this, in my opinion, this is almost a perfect example of rules are made to be broken, right? So there's this kind of like unspoken rule that when you're photographing, subjects, especially women, you don't want to photograph looking up, right? Because it can be unflattering. But this is um, one of those instances where, because you've shot at this unique angle, it really adds such a amazing visual element of interest to the image, right? And you've been able to accomplish that beautifully. So really solid job, David. You got your triangles going on. You have the weight on one leg, so you have that hip popped. You have that beautiful kind of split lighting on her face, and the tones are excellent. So I'm having, honestly, a hard time finding something negative to say about this. Maybe if I had to point out something, it's the crop. And we're cropping her like right at her knees. So it's in that weird spot where I'm almost like, okay, I want to see more of what's going on there, or maybe I just want to focus a little bit more on her face and more on her expression. So it's kind of in that weird in between zone. But that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm still trying to decide if I like that or not. Other than that, the only other thing I find a little distracting is her pinky on her right hand. You kind of have this like V shape that she's creating, and it looks almost a little too unnatural. So I'd maybe just bring that finger in a little bit closer. Gary, what are you seeing that I'm missing? Because I know I'm missing something here. I just don't know what it is.
I love the low angle. It gives a real high fashion look to this shot, and the pose complements it. I'm with you on the finger. It is one of the things that I noticed straight away. Crop, I'd either go lower or a little bit higher. I'd either put the whole legs in, or I would go to mid thigh kind of thing, rather than just above the knee. I'd like to see a little more space at either side of the elbows as well. I think maybe even a square crop on this, losing a little bit of the very top, but giving us a little more width either side, would work really, really well. And the other thing that I'm just getting a little bit of discordances is the gradient that falls off on the background towards the top of the image, where it goes a little bit grey. And I'd love to have seen this actually, because it's so contrasted. The use of the split light is, like you say, unorthodox, I would say. And that low camera angle, that just to bring her off a completely white background would have made her really pop.
Right.
And the only other thing that I would say is just watch those highlights on the cheek. They're very, very, because black skin can have a little more oil to it. It acts almost as a reflector, and if we look at that cheek, we're just losing a little bit. And do you know what else I would have done? Just for me, and this is me personally, is I would have chucked a load of grain on that and given it a proper filmic look, because 5-10% grain, because and that would be monochromatic noise I would add on the retouch, because I think the contrast reminds me of a classic David Bailey or a Helmut Newton type shot. And I actually want it to be a little bit grittier, if that makes sense, by putting that little bit of grain into it. But love the angles, love the fact that, we've lost a bit of detail in the blacks and the hair. We've got that little bit of shine. But I can forgive that because I've got that old world fashion film look.
It works because it's black and white. It works, the high contrast.
Yeah.
If it was color, it might not be as effective.
No, definitely not. And I think, but yeah, just like you say, perhaps a little bit on the crop, that little pinky, and for me, just make that whole background white, because I think it would make it really pop.
Absolutely. Great. David, thank you so much for submitting this image. I love this. I don't know if you know this person or if it's just a model or whoever, or client, but I bet this person would be absolutely stoked on it. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. This next photo, who is this from? This photo comes from Chris Brophy, And this was shot with a Nikon D850 with an 85 millimeter lens, and used using a natural light reflector. So, why don't you start here, Gary, if you don't mind?
Okay. Um, First thing I'll start with is I actually love the gentleness of the black and white. You know, we're going from the very high contrast image we've just seen to the very soft tones of this. And I think with the difference in subject, I think it complements the image really, really well. And while the author has pushed to the right to the limit of what the white exposure can be on this, there is
Mm-hmm.
detail in every little bit when you see it zoomed in. So that is, a really good exposure, and it's allowing the skin to still be soft and natural. Um, but there is detail in every bit of the dress. The bit I find that I would improve a little bit more is the pose on this. I just find it a little bit. It's a moment captured rather than, to me, a moment constructed, if that makes sense. Um, I'm not sure what she's doing, why she's crouching, and with the hand up, it kind of creates a little bit of discordance with the knees down, if that makes sense. So,
Yes.
a little bit of refinement, tell a little bit more of the story. If there was something perhaps on the waterline where it meets the sand that was personal, then it would be perhaps she's bending down to pick it up. And sometimes, even though it's just a person in a background, you can still tell a story. And I feel that there's half a story here rather than a full story. And I'm struggling. Where I'm struggling is to get why she's kneeling down with a hand in the air without any more of a story. Um, and that just creates that little bit of discordance in my mind that makes me want to know more. But in itself, that also creates interest because I want to know the backstory. I want to know more, so it makes the image more interesting. So just a little work on if she is doing a pose like that, why is she doing a pose like that? If not, let that dress flow. I bet there's
Yep.
images that Chris has got here where she's standing, walking along that shoreline that just gives that beautiful demure kind of summer dress, soft curls in the hair kind of look. But kudos for trying something different. But all it needs is that one little element as to why she's doing it, and then it all makes sense. But at the moment, I'm struggling to make sense of the pose as such. But love the depth of field, the way that there's rendering in the background, but nothing that conflicts. And other than that, like I say, it's just a pose. The light's lovely in it, nice and
Mm-hmm.
soft. Just try it a little bit different.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and one thing the first thing that caught my attention was the processing. You know, it's and whether this is necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, it's just is what it is. Is it's processed very kind of like that old school 80s glamour glow, so to
Yeah.
speak. And some people really like that. Personally, I do feel it's a little dated. If that was the intention that you were going for, kudos to you. But if this was something you were trying to sell to a client, you're trying to make a business out of it, I don't know how many people would be interested in that processing style. So it's just something to think about depending on what your intention with the photo is. To echo what you said about the pose, she does feel a little kind of closed and not flowing as well as she could. I'm glad you used that word flowing because that was trying to look for a word to describe what I would like to see. And she's got this beautiful dress. It's at a beach. It's always windy at the beach, so maybe have her bring her knees out a little bit more, separate them a little bit so they're not just so tucked in. Have one knee higher than the other. She's got this little Ricky Bobby conundrum going on where she doesn't know what to do with her hands. So have her do something with her hands. Have her maybe gently caress or like move her hair out of her face because it's windy. Maybe playing with some of the rocks or the sand, whatever it may be. Just find that pose a little bit, as you mentioned, just to echo what you said. And I think you have a great photo, Chris. So thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. Okay, we got another photo from Carmen. And Carmen, no last name. And Carmen captured this with a Nikon Z5, go Team Nikon, with a 28 to 75 2 weight, using a Nanlite 300. I'm assuming that's 300 watt strobe camera, right, with a 34-inch softbox. Okay, so let's see here. So this is, we're going to echo a little bit what we said earlier. I think this is another example, and I think you're going to agree with me on this, Gary. This is another example of a photo. Well, you know what? Before I talk about the negatives, let me talk about the highlights. Sorry, I didn't want to jump too quickly into just ripping you apart here, Carbon. This is a beautiful image. I love the set design, the choice in the background, those wings, the processing, the lighting, and the skin tones. Beautifully done. Beautifully well done. And I think, to get to this level of refinement does take a lot of skill and time. So kudos to you on that, Carmen. A couple things I would change. A couple small tweaks with your lighting and with your pose. So the lighting is almost, is in my opinion, is almost perfect. However, one thing I'm seeing is we are getting a little bit of the transition of shadows between her left side and her right side could be, I think, feathered a little bit better. And I'm noticing that the most when you look at the light on her left arm versus her right arm. So I would almost like to see the light brought up on her right arm a little bit more. So whether that's, and I think what would actually solve that is using a larger softbox. 34 inches is actually quite small for a full body portrait. So I would encourage you to use something at least as big as a 48 when you're doing full body portraits. And even then, I think 48 is too small. And I think that would really help solve that. The other thing is the pose. So we talked about this earlier, and I know you're seeing it too, Gary, and that we're falling back into that amputee kind of deal, right? So we're not seeing her hands. Her hands are hidden. Her right leg is completely invisible, and I do know it's a big dress. However, when you do have one leg coming out, we need to show some sort of evidence that the other leg is also present. So sometimes it could be tricky when you're capturing dresses like this where you have the slit. So what would you say? Does that bother you, Gary? Or what would you say maybe we could do?
Yeah, it was actually the first thing I noticed on this was I'm looking for the even evidence of the other leg because of the amount of tulle in the skirt. Even just to have brought the skirt back a little bit so you see the outline of the leg through it, I think would have helped with that. And again, with the right arm where the hand is completely lost, just bringing it forward a little bit more would have refined it just that little bit. So yeah, I'm totally in agreement with that.
Yep. I would say those are probably just the biggest thing is the posing. Showing off those hands, showing off those legs a little bit more. But I love her attitude. I love her sass. She's got this like sass to her, and I love her expression personally. I think it's great.
Yeah, there's a strong element of confidence in her, which I think it echoes. And just one other thing on the posing for me, and I'm very much a traditionalist when it comes to it. But when you have a feminine presenting subject like we've got here, try not to pose them absolutely square onto the camera because you present the hips at the widest aspect. And this is a very slender, very toned girl, but you're making her look that little bit wider than she is. So just a slight rotation in the hips. Either way, normally the traditional rule would be to turn her away from the key light a little bit more. So it would be to bring the right shoulder forward, left shoulder forward, right shoulder back. So she turns to camera left, away from the light, which is but either way, because she's slender, you get away with it. But you just make her look even slimmer than she is, and that is something that always gets asked for by clients as such. One thing that really strikes me well in this, and it's been really well handled, is normally when you have a cool colour like the mint greeny blue that we've got with the silvery tones here, normally it regresses in the image when you've got a warm background, because you can see that if we look at the background, there's quite a lot of warm tones in that. But because of the amount of skin showing, she still progresses forward in the image and it gives her that presence. So that's been really nicely handled in the retouch to make that quite clearly apparent. But even just, I'm with you on the softbox. I go for as big as I can get away with. My go-to is a 60-inch for full-length portraits in the studio. On location, it's a 48, like you say. But in the studio where I've got that, I'm not worrying about wind and things like that as much.
Right.
Then a good 60 inch, and I try and get it so that the bottom of the softbox is round about level with the shoulder height, because that means
Oh,
that
so pretty
light's going to
high.
come down. Yeah, I like it nice and high, so you
Okay.
get that natural looking shadow from the light being nice and high coming down. It gives you the shadows that matches the shadows we're used to seeing all the time, because because rooms are ceiling lit, got the sun in the sky, those kind of things, and it just creates
Yeah.
that more natural shadowing and modelling on the face. But another thing with this, that even just a small reflector on camera left, just to
Hmm.
kick a little bit back into that right arm,
That arm. Yep.
would have just helped her. And also just under that jawline, it's given her a stronger jaw than she needs as
Right.
such on this. But so many positives on this.
Hmm.
And the retouch is beautiful, really good and clean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Well, hey, Carmen, thank you so much for submitting this. Great image to talk about. Really, really good talking points here. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. This next photo comes from Jared Fix, and unfortunately, Jared told me he couldn't watch live because he's currently on set right now. He's a photographer from Hollywood, and he does a lot of these kind of Hollywood style images. This was he used a Z9 for this. It was handheld with a 200-watt strobe. Um, Handheld above the camera. Very much like the getting ready images during a wedding, photographing Oscar attendees dressed their best is a thing. They are in their own world and we capture them as they are. I had the pleasure of photographing Dancing with the Stars host Julianne Howe getting ready for the Oscars. This was a super fast paced shoot. He only had 10 minutes with her, so I had to let her vibe to do the Audrey Hepburn inspired look. There was absolutely no time to test or set up the shot. My intention was to capture her with the direct flash to create a timeless memory. So, Gary, why don't you start with this?
Yeah, I love this. It's got that very editorial feel that's very in vogue as such at the moment with wedding photography of all places. Certainly in Europe, um, this running the flash down the barrel of the lens to give that on camera flash look has been really effective here, and it does give me that timeless feel of, it could have been shot by Herb Ritts, it could have been shot by Newton, it could have been shot by all of those. The only thing I would change on this is just to clean up the edges a little bit. We've just got a hint of a photo frame at the top and a hint of a book on the table, and I just think they're just catching my eye because of the contrasts. But other
Mm-hmm.
than that, because of the style of shot and what it is and the way it's been done, I think the processing's good. Could maybe pull a little bit more detail out of the black, but there's not a
Okay.
lot to critique. It is the style of shot that it is, and it's been very well executed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I know this is kind of more of a candid, free flowing image, so there's a little bit of direction here, but not too much. But how do you feel about um her arms? Like they're almost mirroring each other, and it almost looks a little unnatural even. But do you think that takes away from the moment or the pose, or does it? It's just part of what it is.
I think it gives the feeling that she's a dancer,
Okay.
because she's got dance hands there, and the way she's, even though she's wearing, you know, tall heels, you can see from the calf muscle that she's extending those legs and pushing those feet forward. So it just gives me that feel that without even know, I don't know the lady because obviously it's an American show, um, but I could tell she has something to do with dance just by her pose, because it, like you say, it is unnatural, but it is very much an artistic dance pose as such, with the hands and position, the break on the wrist. And one thing you see here, which tells me more about that, is if you look at the wrist positions, how both of
Right.
them have just got that break in them that just tells me in the fingers what we refer to in England as a Barbie hand, where
Okay.
they've got that separation between the index finger, the middle finger, and the thumb, that
Yeah.
just gives that kind of look like a Barbie doll has as such. So yeah, while I agree it's not what your average person would do, they'd be more likely to display the arms sideways than up. It very much tells me she's got something to do with dance.
Right on. Right on. Well, Jared, thank you so much for submitting this.
Very
I've
cool.
always, yeah, I've always loved this photo. What a fun moment. So thank you for sharing it. to us and to the world. So, okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So this next photo comes from Scott Tibbles, and Scott used a single strobe behind her for a hair light, and then another flash with basically booming right over her. So we got two lights set up here. This is what it looks like. Let's see here. So there's one thing about this image that is kind of throwing me off a little bit, and I'm curious to see if you agree, Gary, or if I'm just crazy. Okay, and maybe we all know I'm crazy, but the we have her framed in this doorway, right? And when you have symmetrical lines and repeating patterns like this, when I see a photo like this, I feel like you need to play into that, and you need to frame it perfectly, or you need to go the complete opposite direction and not follow the guidelines of these doorways or these little architectural elements perfectly. So what I'm trying to get at here is, it almost feels like we needed to move. We needed the photographer needed to take one step to the right. So because we have a little bit of this distortion where the right side of the doorway is pulling away from the camera, and it's kind of throwing off the balance of the image a little bit, right? So I feel like, and I do recognize there's a bush there, but even with that bush, you could shoot a little bit above it, you could shoot through it, do something, but you as a result, you have a lot of this space on the right hand side of the frame that's pulling away from the subject. So what I would almost do, what would help that a little bit, I think, is if you actually just crop it in tighter, but stepping to the side would really help with that as well. Other than that, I do, and I grill you on this every single time, Scott, but I'm going to say it again. I do think we're just borderline a little too hot on some of the highlights on the hair, maybe a little bit on the skin tone, but that's really the only things I would have to say. The positives is that it's a great location, a great pose. She looks very relaxed. She looks very happy. Those would really be the only things I have to say. What do you think here, Gary?
Yeah, I get the feeling from this that Scott's posed her bang in the middle. He stepped back to get his camera position, and then this bush has got in the way. And I'm totally agreeing with you that just a step to the right to a perfectly framed central, or to take a further step to the left and go more with a diagonal and push her into the corner, would have just balanced it a little bit. I'm also in agreement with you about it's just a little bit hot on the hair. And it's just giving that slightly over-flashed look. For me, just tone it down, just probably only about a third of a stop. That's all it needs to be. And the other thing I would look at is this is just moving forward, because it's still a great portrait. It's what I would class as a typical senior's portrait as such, in a nice location, is just do a little bit of post-production and take some of the highlights out of the top of the arch and the tree branches above, so that my eyes aren't just getting pulled through the frame. Because in the Western Hemisphere as such, because we always read left to right, we naturally read an image from top left to bottom right. And I'm getting there, and I'm getting to that beautiful subject presented, where it needs to be, but then my eyes are going back up to the top because of those highlights. So just take them out, or even crop them a little bit, and then just take the inside of the arch. But other than that, I think as a saleable portrait, I think it's wonderful. You sell it all day long, and the whole point of critiques is just to take those marginal gains to just make it that little bit better.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, as always, thank you for submitting. And he titled this image, "Don't Smash Your Forerunner in Moab." So I will try not to. I'm going to Moab
please
tomorrow.
Don't.
So
don't do that.
No promises, though. It's happened before. So, all right. We're going to go ahead and move on to this next photo. This was by Ed. And Ed captured this at the Latin Bay at WPPI last month. So it looks like it was probably one of the shoot bays here. I think I started last time, so Gary, it's your turn to start.
Okay. Yeah, positives are a really good exposure. The way the skin's been handled on the face and the detail in the blacks is really, really good. You know, this is a high contrast image, and dealing with the very dark coloured lace and against the very reflective white dress can cause you a lot of issues depending on how it's lit, and we don't know that because obviously it's been set up on the bay. So that's the immediate good things. The expression is lovely. There's a connection to an off camera there that works well. Um, and that's what I really like about this. Areas for improvement, I find the crops unbalanced. And if she had a little more tension in her face, that use of the negative space behind her, which kind of goes against the traditional rule of negative space to where you look into, if there'd been some tension there, that would have added to it. But because there's a very relaxed face, a soft face, it kind of just makes it look like perhaps the crop was a little bit rushed for
Right.
me. And, you know, we have things like content aware fill nowadays that you could have extended that crop forward and made it a little more balanced. So that's one of the things. The second thing is the hands. Whenever something's lit
Yep.
like this, and looking at the catch lights, looking at the light direction, it looks like it's been lit from either just slightly camera right or behind the camera. And what's happening is the hands are catching the light before the face is again. They're just a little bit closer to it, and it's just a little bit strong that's making them the brightest point. Just as a point of reference, on average, the back of the hand is usually a stop brighter than the face when it comes to skin tone, and that's because the face takes more weathering as such. So if the light's hitting those first, it's going to automatically be the brightest part. So just again, going back to that little thing that I talk about, do the hands really need to be there? And I think they could have been used away from the face and just allowed that natural expression to just show through a little bit more rather than I'm getting drawn from the face to the hands, then to the dress and all of those things. And I don't want that pulling of the eyes as such. But like I say, the retouch is lovely and clean. The exposure is nice on it, but you could just tone those down with a little curves layer or something like that. But the black and white conversion is lovely on this, the way that the reds have been lifted to allow those skin tones to shine through. And sometimes one thing I'll do is if I'm doing a black and white conversion for this, and I use black and white adjustment layers in Photoshop, is I'll perhaps do almost like a reverse color pop. So it'll be where I'll do one black and white layer and I'll perhaps bring the reds down, and then I will mask off the rest of the image. So that would say be on the skin on the hands. So I'd bring the red slider down and it will make the hands darker. And I would then mask them. So that was the only part that was black and white. I would then apply another black and white adjustment layer above that to do the rest of the skin and the rest of the image and do it in layers like that. And it just allows you to manipulate it. It's the same if you've got, for example, red hair and red lips, where you might want to do a different adjustment on the hair than the lips to make them stand out as different tones. So almost like a reverse color pop, where the rest of the image is color and the bits that I want to be black and white,
Yeah.
I'm doing on separate adjustment layers.
Awesome.
But that's a really useful tip for stuff like that.
Right on. Right on. Well, for the sake of time, I won't add too much more, but just to echo a little bit what you said about her face, about the direction she's facing in the crop. So, you know, you have this negative space, Ed, on the side of the image, right? And one thing that I always like to try to do, and I encourage others to do as well, is, you know, if you want, generally speaking, you know, it's nice to have your subject looking into the frame as opposed to out of the frame. So one thing you could do to fix that is just kind of reduce that negative space a little bit so it's not as obvious that she's looking out of the frame. So just something to keep in mind, Ed. But yeah, thanks for sharing this with us. And there were a lot of really cool shooting opportunities here at WPPI, and I'm glad you got to take advantage of them. And I'm sorry I didn't run into you at all. I was there the whole time. I didn't see you once. So next time, try to find me and say hi. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on since we are trying to catch up on time here. This next photo comes from Becky McNerdy, and Becky said that she captured this on a roll of silver paper on the floor, a beauty dish aimed at the model, and a blue and green gel light on either side behind the model pointed at the floor to reflect the surface of the silver paper onto the backdrop. So looks like we're playing a lot with gels. We're playing a lot with color, which is really fun. So there's a couple of things here so that I want to point out. But to start, I want to talk about that I love your use of color, and I love that you're using this reflective, foil or aluminum or whatever that may be, and it's really giving the look of almost water, right? And I know she's wearing this lingerie, but it almost this could work just as well as like if she was wearing a swimsuit even. So kudos to you there. Gary, I'm going to let you talk about the pose. So I'm just going to talk about some of the technical stuff first and the
Okay.
lighting. But basically, I want to address two things here. So for starters, I find the lighting to be a little flat. I would love to see a little bit more direction to this light. And what that's going to do is it's going to create more. You're going to create some darker shadows. And what that's going to enable you to do is you're going to be able to allow this color to pop even more, right? And it's going to make the color stand out. So adjust your flash a little bit so you have a little bit more shadows where that color can fill in better and you have that nicer separation. One thing you could probably do, I'm not really sure how you lit this, but one thing you could do is you could adjust the positioning of your flash so maybe it's a little bit more above her so it's coming down, as opposed to just being a little bit more in front on access to the camera and having that flat look. The other thing I'm seeing is that you have this, like, there's like this, if you look right in the middle of the frame towards the bottom, you have this seam, and I'm not sure if that's a seam in the foil the paper, or if it's like something that we potentially you tried to Photoshop out. Like, I'm not really sure what it was, but it's very apparent to me, and I think that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. And looking at the comments, yep, John, you absolutely are correct. I am going to point it out. The Apple Watch, just or any watch in this case, it doesn't matter what type of watch it is, really, unless it's something very dainty, doesn't work here. So just don't do it. Gary, I'm gonna let you talk in the pose now.
Yeah, no problem. I totally agree with what you said, Sean, with the light. But one thing I will congratulate the author on is not over gelling the subject as such, that we've still got that cleanness. A couple of things for me is, like you say, the Apple Watch. That's one thing. When you've got somebody laid on the floor, one thing that will make him more complementary to them is you push the shoulders down to the floor, you push the butt down to the floor, but you make the biggest arch in your back that you can possibly make to create that little curvature, and that really helps. So that would elongate the body line, make the subject look even slimmer than she is, and that would help. The second point is the wrist where the watch is. We spoke about the watch. I'm not going to go over that. I always take them off. Anything that's modern, I'll take off in this kind of shot. But just rotating the hand so it either sits onto the top of the left thigh or onto the body line or even across the stomach would just prevent that clawed kind of amputation that we've got at the moment. And the other point I would raise on this is if you look at the right leg where it meets the knee, you've got that compression on the lower calf, the soleus and the back of the ankle there. If you just taken the heel and put that onto the knee, then there's nothing to compress as such, but it's a case of just touch down if they are going to touch rather than allowing the weight to fall. So big arch in the back, just get a little bit more and elongate this near leg, push this leg that's nearest the camera, the left leg, just stretch that foot out a little bit more in front and get your subject to put it on a tiptoe so you can count them in 3, 2, 1 tiptoes, and that just makes the legs look a whole lot longer. And you would have made this girl look 12 inches taller. And there's just the little things that just come with practice. And the only other point I would raise is where the bra, it looks like it's a peephole bra, like there's padding at the side, and then and my eyes getting drawn there. So one thing you can do is just select a little bit of colour on that, just add a blank layer, paint it over the top, and then change the blend mode to colour, and that would have just blended it a little bit more. But
Gotcha.
I love the experimentation here, and I love the Mylar sheet on the floor. It's giving that water effect.
Yeah, very very cool. I think the concept here was brilliant, and it was really fun to see. Just a little bit more on the execution, little refinement, and you, Becky, you got yourself an amazing image. So,
Yeah,
all
practice
right,
makes perfect with this. Cool.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to this next image. This next image comes from Sandra, no last name, no context on how it was photographed. So, Gary, why don't you start?
Yep, positives, lovely black and white conversion, nice and soft. You can see those different textures coming out in the hair and then the scarf. Lovely connection with the camera. We've got a really, really pleasing expression here.
Mm-hmm.
Nice and clean, all of that. So they're the real good positives. I love that. And it's got a real wholesome feel to it. I'm going to come back to hands. Particularly, I'm not sure they add anything into this image, and then they actually just create you problems because we've got the cropping through both of the hands. And really, really, no matter what you do with hands, try and avoid cropping through them because it just
Yes.
creates that discordance here. And I think for me personally, I think if the arms had just been down, this would have been an even more beautiful portrait. She's got such a good face and a good expression that would have just instantly cleaned it up. But if you are going to put the hands in, make sure they're all in. I can understand that, that maybe you thought it's more flattering to cut through them here, but actually it just ends up that we lose some of the hand, and it just doesn't work for me in that respect. And the only other
Yeah.
thing I would say is when you've got a black and white conversion, any white spots on dark clothing is going to show up, and there's just a couple on the shoulder line
Yep.
there
I
that are
see
just
it.
catching my eyes. They're just the things that will very quickly take this to the next level as such.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, really not too much more to say here. Again, kind of seems to be a recurring theme. Two recurring themes is one, the negative space on the left of the frame. Crop that in. We don't. It's not necessary. And then yeah, cropping right at the hands. That's a no no. And yeah, I'm struggling because I think it's interesting that she's trying to frame herself with her hands, but it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work as effectively as it could. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, if she just dropped that shoulder, dropped that hand, um, it would be just as effective of an image. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Sandra, for submitting that photo. We're gonna move on. We're almost done, actually, everyone. So let's see here. This one actually comes from Amber Henry.
Oh,
Uh,
are we?
however, however, she said that this photo is 8 years old. So this is not a recent one of her photos. So if we grill her on this, I don't think she'll feel too bad. Um,
I
so
agree. I think she's definitely getting it here, both barrels, because it's amber.
so yeah, I mean, one thing I like about this image is this is kind of one of those examples where I do think negative space can uh, be helpful, right? But two things I would change here: one, recurring theme, don't cut off the elbow. Two, have her looking towards the inside of the frame and towards that negative space as opposed to outside of the frame, because now what's happening is our eyes wandering a little bit. Like you said earlier, we in here in the Western civilization, we read from left to right, right? So we're start at the left of the frame, and then we're like looking towards the left side of the frame, and there's nothing there, and then our eyes bounce to the right. So we're kind of going all over the place. But so on that like on that side of things, it falls short a little bit. But processing is great, lighting's great. What else would you add to that, Gary?
To me, this almost looks like it is a fashion shop rather than a bridal shop,
Mm-hmm.
because while the elbow I can't forgive, it's just just cropping the elbow. It's a no for me on this. But I could see this as an advertorial for perhaps somebody who's doing the crystal work on the her piece and on the back of the dress. I could see it almost as a fashion shop for that. So I can kind of see why it's been done in this way. Um, I like the negative space. I like negative space, but I would have gone bigger with it. I would
Okay.
have gone even bigger with it and given it, you know, a more editorial feel. But it's a beautiful black and white conversion, and what I really enjoy is the handling of the specular highlights on the crystals. I think that's been done really, really well. So
Yeah.
I can't give her that much of a grilling as much as I want to. But
I
yeah,
know, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Amber, this was I mean, it was cool to see, you know, like it's cool to see your work from 8 years ago, and it's kind of fun to revisit those moments, right? And see how you've grown as a photographer. This year, a lot of you know this, but this year I'm celebrating my 15th year in the wedding industry. So one thing I'm doing is I'm going to be doing like a retrospective where I'm going to be kind of posting some of my photos from some of the highlights of my from each year, starting in 2010 when I first entered the industry. So it's been fun doing that, and I'm excited to share that all with you as well at some point. But yeah, thanks for sharing, Amber. This was a cool photo. Even though it sucks, it's still a cool photo. Just, just kidding, just kidding. We love you. We love you.
oh dear, we love Amber.
All right, we got 2 photos left. This next photo, anonymous image, no context given. So Gary, why don't you start?
Yep, I like silhouette. I like the way it can convey a story with very little detail, if that makes sense. Um, I like the fact that there's just a kiss of light on the near side cheek on both of the subjects. This wedding couple here, the connection with the hands is lovely. I'd like to see the heads, perhaps the masculine subject's head just tilted towards his bride a little bit more to give it a little bit more than it looks like he's almost looking above her head, just a touch. What bothers me on this, and I like the way the dress has been handled, so we've not blown the veil, but we've still got detail on the inside, is that great big pot of flowers to the left of them.
Okay.
Because once I've seen that, and the fact that that's in the light, it's catching my eye more than anything else. And while sometimes you can't move these things, sometimes you can. And I get the feeling that isn't affixed, and I'd have been getting in trouble off the venue here by moving that and then putting it back afterwards. But other than that, I would have also done away with the beams at the top of the image because, again, when we've got the silhouette, we want that point of highest contrast to catch our eyes. And, you know, the way they've been framed in the archway is lovely, but then my eyes are going upwards again. So just those little details, I think, would have taken this again to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really the only comment I was going to say was the beams up top, not really adding much to the photo, but I love how the archway is framing them.
Yes.
Personally, Gary, and I think this is the first time on this video, I actually kind of disagree with you about the flowers.
That's good.
They don't bother me at all, and partially the reason is because you have another floral arrangement on the right side of the image on the arch. So I feel like those flowers on the left actually kind of balance out the flowers on the right side of the frame a little bit. So for me, it doesn't bother me. Now one thing you could have done is remove the flowers and then move the subjects a little bit more to the left of the arch, so you have a little bit more balance, right, between. So basically they're taking the place of the floral arrangement, right? So you have the balance of the flowers on the right side of the frame, balancing with them. But I actually, it doesn't really bother me at all personally. But you know, art is subjective and everything.
Yeah, totally. And it's nice actually to disagree sometimes because that makes for great discussion.
Definitely. Just like, you know, you might say, oh, I like liquid drum and bass, and I might say, no, I like jungle better, you know?
I don't like any drum and bass. That's the problem. So we'll be all right on that.
Oh, man.
No,
we might disagree on that. I love drum and bass. I love drum and bass. But we can both agree that house music is definitely amazing. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we can agree on that at least. All right. Well, this is our final image of the evening, everyone, and this comes from Austin Alvarez, and Austin captured this using a Canon R6 with a 24-70, a Geek Kodo S26 8200, and a 12-foot cheetah stand. So basically a 26-inch softbox with a 200-watt strobe. Okay, let me actually take a quick look at this because I haven't really looked at this in super good detail yet. Um, okay, okay. There's a lot of things here I'm seeing, Austin, that are really easy to get wrong, and you've done them all right. So I'm struggling to find something here. And what I'm trying to referring to is a lot of times when you have people looking away from the frame, you struggle with seeing too much of the whites of their eyes, but you've balanced that very well. The balance between the highlights and the shadows is very nice. The crop is very well done. You have that red that's contrasting so well against the green. The toning and the processing is perfect. Um, Maybe the only thing, and this is like I'm just nitpicking here, but maybe the only thing is the placement of the bouquet. It's kind of hard to tell what it is because you have that railing in front of her, and you have kind of these three competing elements in the same circle. You have the railing, you have the hand, her right hand, and you have the bouquet all in one area, and it's just a little distracting. But um yeah, I mean, I'm not seeing a whole lot here that I would change. I mean, this is a great it's a great well balanced image. It's a very saleable image that this client would love. Gary, is there something help me here? I'm just not seeing a whole lot to critique. It's a great photo.
First and foremost, anything that I do pick up is literally nitpicking for the sake of, as if I would be judging in the competition as such. Because as
Right.
a beautiful saleable piece of art, a beautiful record image for this young lady and her family, it's wonderful. It's been really well executed. The balance and the color harmonies are exceptional in here. But if we want to finish on a real, and Austin, take this please in the way that I'm intending it, that if we're talking about taking Austin from a merits level photographer to that next level up and keeping going up and up and up, because this is an easy meritable image. This would be an 80 plus all day long, in my opinion. So if we are talking about the little tiny steps, and again, like I say, marginal gains, just to take it up, there's two or three things that you've picked up on that I would also just add a little bit more
Okay.
if we don't mind a couple of minutes on this, because I think
Please.
it's
Please
worth
do.
it because it is so good that let's take it even higher as such. Okay, so I'm going to start with the placement. I think it's wonderful the way that the train on the dress follows, but and it's only a little but if she's been another one step up, if you look at the position of the head and the way the bottom of the handrail comes down from above her into the back of the head, if she'd been one place up, she would have mirrored the curve on her cheekbone would have mirrored the curve on the foliage coming down. So just a little bit higher there. And I am really nitpicking to just
Mm-hmm.
take this, and it would have avoided that bottom rail running into the back of the head.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think I'm in agreement with you. I think had the flowers either been placed onto the top rail or even into the hand that's on the top rail, and we could have seen them more, again, it would have just been that little additional element that just takes it that teeny step higher.
Right.
So that's another thing that would have just gone up. There's a tiny little bit of hot light coming from the sunlight at the back here, just on the back of the shoulder, the back of the arm. So a little bit more time in retouching to just bring that down just a fraction. And again, please, I am really looking to nitpick to just take this to that very, very next level. Tiny little bit, the top handrail that's coming down, just tone it down just a fraction. And the very, very last bit, and I am really picking here, if we go down to the bottom left hand side of the step, the very bottom step, there's just a highlight there that's just catching me. But I'm talking a
Oh,
very
yep.
small
Okay.
amount, and I've gone through that, Austin, as if I was judging it to just take it where it would go to go even higher than it is. But it's a fabulous capture and it's a really fantastic image to finish on. Really, really is. So I'm really nitpicking, and I hope I'm doing it for the right way rather than doing it just to find something to have fault with. Nothing's a fault here. It's just elements that can make it even stronger.
Yeah, and that kind of feedback, in my opinion, Gary, is awesome, because when you're photographing at this high of a level, you're, in my opinion, you're probably shooting with a lot of intention to enter these in competitions, right? And I want to know, like, hey, what's going to be the difference between scoring an 85 and a 90, right? For
Yeah.
example. So little tiny things like that that maybe I wouldn't pick up on are super important to know, because again, like when you're shooting at this high of a level, anything you can do to really, get that jump and elevate your work even higher is going to be so helpful. So, Austin, amazing image. This is probably one of my favorite images I've seen from you. Really, I'd be very stoked personally if I shot this and had this in my portfolio. So,
Yeah, me
well
too.
done. Well done. Well, guess what? That brings us to the end. We're done. We're done, everyone. Gary, what did you think of your first experience doing these image critiques? Did you have
Oh,
fun?
I loved it. I loved it, and it's the more you do of this is the best learning you can ever get. While just those little bits that we don't see until they're pointed out to us, it just makes such a difference. And it is. We do a lot of live print judging in the UK. And I always say to people, always come and watch, because it is the best free education you're ever going to get when it comes to this industry. But it's been lovely to see the images. They've been great. There's not a poor image amongst them. But it doesn't matter how good you are, you can always get better and see little bits that you've missed. And that's why I think it's these kind of things are a massive give back to the industry, and why I'm passionate about them. And it makes no odds to me that it's now 11:30 p.m. here. I don't mind, because I've always been lucky in that I've had the opportunity to learn from others, from watching critiques and stuff like that. So if I get the chance to give it back, I always will do.
Well, yeah, and we, speaking on behalf of the community, we sincerely appreciate you. I mean, you're extremely talented, and I love your perspective on posing and lighting and everything that makes a beautiful portrait. So thank you for spending your
Very
time
welcome.
with us. Before everyone goes, and before you go, is there anywhere that people can find you or learn from you? Any workshops coming up or anything like that?
I've got 3 classes at Shutterfest.
Okay.
Later on this month, I've got one on maternity posing, one on black and white portraits, which is my speciality, and one on workflow using Evoto, funnily enough. So
Okay.
yeah, from concept, how I look at an image and how I'm going to retouch it, and then how I finish it off ready to print, because the one thing I've always done, our competitions are print based. So everything has to be printable.
Right. Awesome.
And,
Well,
that in itself is an art, as in what you see on screen to what comes out as a print. So yeah,
yes.
they're there, and there's a few online tutorials. There's a pose handbook, a lighting handbook on my website. Feel free to have a look.
Absolutely. Well, I'll definitely post your link so people can learn from you.
Thank you.
And before we, one last thing, we got to get down to business. We're going to give away 2 1,600 credit giveaways for Evoto for 2 random people. So if you are one of these 2 winners, please send me a message and I'll get that off to you. And I'm also going to share a link so everyone can try Evoto for free as well. I asked ChatGPT to pick 2 random numbers corresponding to each of the images. So those are 3 and 11, which means the winners are Radon Burton and Ed Ailman. So congratulations. Go ahead and send me a message and we'll get those off to you. Gary, once again, thank you so much. I'm going to let you get to sleep. Let's chat about some DJing stuff. And
yeah, definitely.
As always, fam, I hope that you stay classy, stay sassy, and be dope nasty. Have a go at everyone.